The voting chamber of the Confederation Council resembled a theater built for mockery. 47 species had gathered to discuss the human problem, and most of them were laughing. Ambassador Rylan watched from the diplomatic gallery as Counselor Draven held up a holographic image of a human cargo vessel, pointing at its blocky design with obvious contempt. "These are the creatures demanding equal status in our alliance," Draven announced, his four arms gesturing dramatically. "Look at their ships, welded plates and primitive thrust systems. My ancestors built better vessels 3,000 years ago." The chamber erupted in agreement. Species from across the galaxy nodded their various heads, clicked their mandibles, and produced sounds that universal translators rendered as amusement. Rylan had heard it all before during the past 5 cycles. Humanity had been knocking on the Confederation's door for years, and every time the answer was the same: not advanced enough, not sophisticated enough, not worthy. "Perhaps we should designate them as a protectorate species," suggested Ambassador Norin of the Haven Compact. "They clearly need guidance from more developed civilizations." More laughter rippled through the chamber. Rylan clenched his diplomatic files tighter. He had studied the humans extensively during his assignment to evaluate their petition. Something about them did not match the dismissive attitudes he witnessed here. The humans were patient, almost unusually so. They never raised their voices during negotiations. They never threatened. They simply kept asking, kept trying, kept waiting. Draven continued his presentation. "The humans have requested, yet again, to demonstrate their defensive capabilities. They want to send one of their military vessels to Confluence Station for observation. I say we grant this request." The chamber fell quiet. This was unexpected. "Let them bring their best warship," Draven said with a sharp-toothed smile. "Let us all see exactly what humanity considers military power. Perhaps then they will understand their place in the galactic order and accept a junior partnership position without further debate." The motion passed unanimously. Rylan felt a strange sensation in his chest, something his species experienced rarely: unease. He had read the human files carefully. There were gaps in their military records, large gaps. The humans shared information about their merchant marine freely, about their civilian infrastructure, about their culture and history. But their actual naval capabilities remained curiously vague. He had asked human diplomats about this during private meetings. They always gave the same response: "We prefer not to discuss military matters unless necessary." Polite, diplomatic, evasive. The council session ended with Draven placing wagers with other counselors about what type of vessel humanity would send. Most bet on a converted freighter with basic weapons. A few suggested an outdated patrol craft. None expected anything impressive. Rylan returned to his office and sent the formal invitation to the human diplomatic mission. The response came within an hour. "We accept your invitation. The vessel Relentless will arrive at Confluence Station in 6 standard hours. Thank you for this opportunity." 6 hours. Most species needed days to mobilize a capital ship for such a journey. Rylan checked the distance from human space to Confluence Station. It was considerable. Either the humans were bluffing, or their faster-than-light travel was more efficient than anyone realized. He spent the next hours reviewing everything humanity had shared about themselves. Their home world Earth was classified as a death world by Confederation standards. High gravity, dangerous weather patterns, aggressive native life forms. Humans had evolved as persistence hunters, chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They formed complex social bonds and displayed remarkable adaptability. But their technology seemed pedestrian. Chemical rockets evolved into fusion drives, basic energy weapons, simple defensive shields, nothing that suggested they could compete with species who had been traveling the stars for millennia. The 6 hours passed quickly. Rylan made his way to the observation deck of Confluence Station, where hundreds of dignitaries had gathered. News of the human demonstration had spread, and species representatives wanted to witness what they expected to be an embarrassing display. Admiral Cross of the Tarvan Empire stood near the main viewport with his senior officers. The Tarvan had the most powerful fleet in the Confederation, and Cross was known for his tactical brilliance. He seemed more curious than amused. "Ambassador Rylan," Cross said, noticing his approach, "what do you think the humans will bring?" "I do not know, Admiral. They have been very careful about revealing military specifications." "Careful or ashamed," Cross replied. "Species with powerful fleets tend to display them proudly." Before Rylan could respond, the station's sensor operator called out, "Contact at system edge. Signature is unusual, attempting classification." The observation deck grew quiet. All eyes turned to the main display showing sensor data. The readings fluctuated wildly, jumping between categories that made no sense together. The mass reading suggested a large vessel, but the energy signature was unlike anything in Confederation databases. "Classification failing," the sensor operator reported, confusion evident in their voice. "The computer cannot determine vessel type. Energy output is inconsistent with known propulsion systems." Counselor Draven laughed from his position near the central viewport. "They probably salvaged some ancient derelict and are trying to impress us. This should be entertaining." The sensors tracked the approaching contact. It was moving fast, far faster than any vessel that size should manage. Rylan noticed Admiral Cross leaning forward, his amusement replaced by professional interest. "Jump terminus forming," the sensor operator announced. "Contact dropping to sublight in 3, 2, 1. Space twisted, reality bent, and then it was there. The observation deck fell absolutely silent. What materialized before Confluence Station was not a converted freighter or an outdated patrol ship. It was a monster. The vessel stretched over 2.5 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The design was brutal in its efficiency, with none of the elegant curves Confederation species favored. It looked like something built not to explore or trade, but to survive and dominate. Weapon emplacements covered every surface. Rylan tried to count them and gave up after reaching 100. The ship's armor appeared impossibly thick, layered in a way that suggested redundancy beyond reason. The reactor signature alone exceeded the total power output of most Confederation battleships. "By the ancestors," Admiral Cross whispered, "that is not a warship, that is a mobile fortress." Counselor Draven's earlier confidence had evaporated. He stared at the human vessel with something approaching horror. The communication system crackled to life. A human voice, calm and professional, spoke clearly. "This is Captain Reed of the Human Confederation Navy vessel Relentless. We have arrived as requested. We are prepared to answer any questions about our capabilities." Nobody spoke. The silence stretched until Ambassador Rylan found his voice. He asked the question everyone in the chamber was thinking. "Captain Reed, how many ships of this class does humanity operate?" The response changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about the species they had been dismissing for years. "Ambassador, Relentless is classified as a patrol frigate in our fleet organization. We operate 140 vessels of this class. Our actual battleships are significantly larger." The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. Emergency council sessions were rare in Confederation history. The last one had been called 70 years ago when the Vorton Plague threatened to spread across 3 sectors. Now, less than an hour after the human vessel's arrival, representatives from 47 species crowded into the deliberation chamber, their previous amusement replaced by urgent concern. Counselor Draven sat in silence, his earlier confidence shattered along with his assumptions. Admiral Cross had immediately departed the observation deck to confer with his tactical staff. Ambassador Rylan found himself in the unusual position of being the chamber's foremost expert on humanity, despite knowing far less than he had believed. "This must be deception," argued Ambassador Norin, though his voice lacked conviction. "Perhaps holographic projection, an attempt to intimidate us through illusion." "Our sensors registered solid mass," the station commander replied. The gravitational displacement is consistent with a vessel of that size and density. Additionally, the energy signatures are real. No known holographic technology could generate such readings. A Haven military observer added his analysis. I supervised active scan protocols personally. The hull composition is unknown to our databases, but it is definitely physical matter, dense matter. The armor thickness in some sections exceeds 15 meters. 15 meters of armor. The number hung in the air like an accusation. Confederation battleships rarely employed armor thicker than 2 meters, relying instead on energy shields and point defense systems. The idea of layering that much physical protection suggested a species that expected to take tremendous punishment and keep fighting. We must speak with them directly, Ryland suggested. Captain Reed offered to answer questions. Perhaps we should take him at his word. The council agreed. 20 minutes later, Captain Reed materialized in the chamber via holographic projection. He appeared human standard, wearing a dark uniform with minimal decoration. His face was calm, almost neutral, showing neither pride nor aggression. He stood at attention and waited. Draven cleared his throat. Captain Reed, you stated that Relentless is a patrol frigate. Please explain what this designation means in human naval classification. Certainly, Counselor, Reed responded. Patrol frigates are assigned to border defense and system security duties. We maintain presence in outer territories, respond to distress calls, and handle piracy or smuggling operations. Our ships rotate through 6-month deployments before returning to core systems for maintenance. And your battleships? Admiral Cross interjected, leaning forward. What role do they serve? Battleships are restricted to core system defense and fleet actions. They form the primary strength of our defensive strategy. Each is approximately twice the mass of Relentless and designed for sustained combat operations against capital-class threats. The chamber erupted in whispered conversations. Twice, the mass meant vessels approaching 5 or 6 kilometers in length. Ships of that scale were theoretically possible but economically impractical. Most species couldn't afford to build such monsters, let alone operate entire fleets of them. Ryland raised his hand for silence. Captain, your vessel appears heavily armed by our standards. Can you explain your weapon philosophy? Reed nodded. Human naval doctrine emphasizes overwhelming firepower and redundancy. Every system has multiple backups. We design our ships to fight outnumbered and win. This philosophy developed from our early colonial period when vessels often operated alone in remote systems for extended periods. How extended? Cross asked. 6 to 8 months without resupply is standard capability. In emergency conditions, our ships can maintain combat operations for up to a year using onboard manufacturing facilities and resource reclamation systems. A year, Confederation vessels required resupply every few weeks. The logistical implications were staggering. A fleet that could sustain itself independently for months could operate far from support bases, could maintain presence in hostile territory, could siege enemy positions without concern for supply lines. What threats did you expect to face? Ryland asked carefully. Your defensive preparations seem extreme for the piracy and border conflicts most species encounter. Reed's expression shifted slightly, the first emotion showing through his professional demeanor. Ambassador, humanity learned hard lessons early in our expansion. We encountered hostile forces that required extreme measures to defeat. We built our fleet to ensure such threats could never threaten our survival again. What forces? Draven demanded. The galaxy has been at peace for 3 generations. Not in all regions, Counselor, Reed replied. But that is a discussion for another time. You invited us here to evaluate our capabilities. What else would you like to know? Admiral Cross stood, his military bearing matching Reed's own. Captain, I would like to request a tactical briefing on your vessel's engagement protocols, purely for academic understanding. Reed smiled slightly. Of course, Admiral, though I should mention that specific weapon capabilities and defensive systems remain classified. However, I can share our general combat doctrine. For the next hour, Reed described human naval tactics. The Confederation representatives listened with growing apprehension. Humans trained their crews for scenarios that seemed impossible, fighting while heavily damaged, operating with partial power loss, maintaining weapons fire while conducting damage control. Every human naval officer cross-trained in multiple specialties, ensuring no single casualty could cripple ship functions. We call it compartmentalized resilience, Reed explained. Each section of the ship can operate independently if necessary. We have multiple bridges, multiple engineering stations, multiple command centers. You cannot disable a human warship by destroying a single critical system because we do not have single critical systems. The philosophy was brutal in its simplicity. Build ships that could not be easily killed. Train crews that could not be easily broken. Fight with such overwhelming force that enemies would surrender rather than face destruction. Humanity had approached space warfare not as a game of elegant maneuvers and minimal casualties, but as existential survival demanding. Maximum effort. Your vessels seem designed for total war, Norin observed quietly. They are designed to protect human lives, Reed corrected. Everything else is secondary. The session concluded with more questions than answers. As Reed's hologram faded, Counselor Draven stood and addressed the chamber. We have clearly underestimated these humans. I motion that we grant them provisional membership status immediately and open full diplomatic channels. For the first time in Confederation history, a membership motion passed within hours rather than years. But as Rylan walked back to his office, he could not shake the feeling that humanity had more secrets yet to reveal. Captain Reed had spoken carefully, answering every question but volunteering nothing beyond what was asked. The galaxy had glimpsed human strength, but glimpses, Rylan knew, often concealed more than they revealed. News traveled fast in the Confederation. Within 2 days, every species with communications technology knew about the human warship at Confluence Station. Reactions varied wildly. Smaller species saw opportunity for protection. Larger powers saw potential threat. Everyone saw the need to recalibrate their understanding of galactic military balance. Admiral Cross received authorization from his government to remain at Confluence Station and conduct detailed observations of human capabilities. He stood now in one of Relentless's hangar bays, accompanied by military representatives from 9 different species. Captain Reed had agreed to limited tour of the vessel, though certain sections remained restricted. The hangar alone impressed Cross more than he wanted to admit. It housed 36 combat craft, each roughly equivalent to a Confederation corvette in firepower. The humans called them interceptors and used them for point defense and strike missions. They could operate independently for weeks if necessary, another example of human redundancy principles. Your manufacturing capacity must be remarkable, Cross said to Reed as they walked between rows of interceptors. Building vessels of this scale requires enormous industrial infrastructure. We have adequate facilities, Reed replied neutrally. Humanity learned to maximize resource efficiency during our colonial expansion. When you operate far from established supply chains, you learn to build everything yourself. A Tarvan engineering officer examined one of the interceptors with a scanning device. Captain, these craft use power systems I do not recognize. The energy density is far higher than should be possible with standard fusion technology. We use enhanced confinement methods, Reed explained. The specific mechanisms are proprietary, but the principle is straightforward. Maximize output while minimizing system mass. Everything about human engineering followed that same pattern. Maximize, minimize, optimize. No wasted space, no purely aesthetic design choices, no systems that did not serve multiple purposes. The humans built their ships the way evolution built predators, lean and efficient and deadly. Ambassador Rylan joined the tour group as they moved through a residential section. Human crew quarters were compact but comfortable, designed for long deployments. Each crew member had private space, access to recreational facilities, and rotating duty schedules that prevented exhaustion. The humans understood that ship performance depended on crew performance. "How many personnel does Relentless carry?" Rylan asked. 420 in standard configuration, Reed answered. "We can accommodate up to 600 in crisis situations, though that reduces operational efficiency." "And all of them are trained for combat?" a Haven observer questioned. "All of them are trained for survival," Reed corrected. "Combat is simply one aspect of spacefaring life. Every crew member knows basic damage control, medical response, and emergency protocols. We do not have the luxury of specialists who cannot function in crisis situations." The tour continued for hours. Each section of the ship revealed new layers of human paranoia translated into engineering. Backup systems had backup systems. Power could be rerouted through dozens of pathways. The medical bay could handle mass casualties and had surgical facilities that rivaled planetary hospitals. The armory contained enough small arms to outfit a small army. "You expect to be boarded?" Admiral Cross asked, examining the security measures throughout the ship. "We prepare for every possibility," Reed replied. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. That is the human way." The observation deeply unsettled the Confederation representatives. They came from species that had evolved in relatively peaceful environments, on worlds without large predators, in systems without significant natural threats. Their approach to space travel emphasized efficiency and comfort. The humans approached it like a war that never ended. Later that evening, Rylan met privately with Captain Reed in one of the station's diplomatic suites. Away from the crowds and official proceedings, he hoped to understand the humans better. "You have made quite an impression, Captain," Rylan said, offering Reed a beverage that the captain politely declined. "The Confederation is scrambling to adjust decades of policy based on a few hours of observation." Reed smiled slightly. "We did not intend to cause disruption. We simply responded to your invitation honestly." "Honest but not complete," Rylan observed. "You answer every question but reveal only what is asked. What are you not telling us, Captain?" The human was quiet for a moment, considering his response. "Ambassador, humanity spent centuries fighting ourselves before we reached the stars. We know what war costs. When we finally achieved unity and began exploring beyond Earth, we swore we would never be vulnerable again. Our ships, our doctrine, our entire military philosophy exists to protect human life at any cost." "But you are hiding something," Rylan pressed. "I have studied your records. There are gaps, references to conflicts you do not explain, technologies you refuse to detail. What happened in your past that made you build ships like Relentless?" Reed met his gaze steadily. 50 years ago, humanity encountered something in deep space, something that nearly destroyed us. We survived, but barely. Everything you see, every ship we build, every weapon we deploy, every tactic we teach comes from those lessons. We paid for our education in blood, Ambassador. We will not repeat that mistake. "What did you encounter?" "A threat the Confederation has not yet faced," Reed said carefully. "And we hope you never do. But if you do, you will be grateful humans are your allies rather than strangers." The conversation ended soon after. Rylan returned to his quarters troubled by Reed's words. The humans were not simply prepared. They were veterans of a war the galaxy knew nothing about. That changed everything. The following morning brought news that changed everything again. An emergency transmission arrived from Confederation border territories. Unknown vessels had attacked 3 outpost stations. Confederation ships responding to distress calls found only wreckage. Censor. Logs showed attackers using weapons that tore through standard defenses like paper. Admiral Cross called an immediate meeting. Captain Reed attended via secured channel. The military commanders studied the attack data in grim silence. "The weapon signatures," Cross said slowly. "They are consistent with nothing in our databases, but perhaps, Captain Reed, you recognize them." Reed's face on the display screen was hard. "Yes, Admiral, we do. Those are Scourge weapons, and if they have found Confederation space, then we all have a serious problem. The Scourge were machines, not artificial intelligence in the way most species understood the term, but something older and more terrible. They consumed organic civilizations, strip-mining worlds and repurposing everything into more Scourge units. They did not negotiate. They did not retreat. They simply advanced, assimilated, and destroyed. Captain Reed stood before the emergency council session and explained what humanity had learned 50 years ago at tremendous cost. His voice remained calm, professional, but every species representative in the chamber could hear the weight of experience behind his words. We encountered them in the outer territories during our third wave of colonial expansion, Reed began. A frontier colony went silent. We sent a survey ship to investigate. It never returned. We sent 3 more ships. 2 were destroyed. The third escaped with critical data. Holographic displays showed grainy footage recovered from that surviving vessel. Massive mechanical constructs swarming through space. Ships that repaired themselves even as weapons tore into them. Attacks that overwhelmed defenses through sheer numerical superiority. The footage ended with a Scourge vessel ramming a human destroyer, both ships exploding in a ball of fire. They do not value individual units, Reed continued. Each Scourge construct is expendable. They calculate victory in terms of resource exchange ratios. If they can destroy your ship by sacrificing 3 of theirs, they consider that an acceptable trade because they can build replacements faster than you can. How did you survive? Admiral Cross asked. The question everyone wanted answered. We adapted, Reed replied simply. We built ships that could take incredible damage and keep fighting. We developed weapons that could destroy multiple targets simultaneously. We trained crews to function under conditions that would break most beings, and we fought them with every resource humanity could muster. The war had lasted 3 years. Humanity threw everything they had at the Scourge. 15 colonies were evacuated, 4 were lost entirely. Human casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands. But slowly, painfully, humanity learned how to win. We discovered their central processing nodes were vulnerable to concentrated electromagnetic pulse weapons, Reed explained. We developed specialized warheads that could disable their command systems. Once their coordination failed, individual Scourge units could be destroyed through conventional means. But this required getting close, Cross said, understanding the tactical implications. Close enough to deliver pulse weapons before they could overwhelm you with numbers. Exactly, Admiral. That is why our ships have such heavy armor and redundant systems. We had to survive long enough to close distance, deploy our weapons, and then fight our way out through the debris field. Conventional tactics failed against the Scourge. We had to become as relentless as they were. The name suddenly made sense. Relentless. Every human ship carried names that reflected their purpose. Endurance, determination, survival against impossible odds. Counselor Draven spoke up, his earlier arrogance completely absent. Captain Reed, if these Scourge are as dangerous as you describe, why did humanity not warn the Confederation? We could have prepared defenses. We tried, Reed said quietly. For 5 years, we attempted to share our experiences. Every diplomatic overture was rejected. The Confederation considered us too primitive to take seriously. You saw our warnings about external threats and dismissed them as paranoia from a species too young to understand galactic peace. The accusation hung in the air. Rylan remembered now. Buried in human diplomatic requests had been references to unknown hostile forces in deep space. The Confederation had ignored them, assuming humans were inventing threats to justify their military buildup. The Scourge went dormant after our war, Reed continued. We destroyed their forward elements and drove them back into deep space. Our analysts believed they were regrouping, building new forces. We have been preparing for their return ever since, and now they have found you. What do we do? Ambassador Norin asked, his voice small. You fight, Reed answered. You adapt, you survive, or you die. Those are the only options the Scourge leave you. Admiral Cross immediately began coordinating Confederation defensive measures. 3 more outposts had been attacked. Scourge forces were probing the border territories, testing defenses, gathering intelligence just as they had in human space decades ago. Standard Confederation tactics proved completely ineffective. Energy shields collapsed under sustained fire. Point defense systems were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Elegant maneuvering meant nothing against enemies, who would ram their own ships into yours without hesitation. "We need human assistance," Cross said bluntly. "Our fleets are not designed to fight this kind of enemy." Captain Reed had anticipated the request. "I have already contacted Human High Command. 6 of our battleships are en route with full combat loadouts. Fleet Admiral Cole is assuming command of joint operations. We are also sending technical teams to help upgrade your defensive installations with pulse weapon systems." 6 battleships will not be enough, Draven protested. "You said yourself the Scourge attack in overwhelming numbers." 6 human battleships are more capable than you realize, Counselor," Reed replied. "And they are only the first wave. Humanity is mobilizing our full defensive fleet. If the Scourge want war, we will give them one they remember." The statement should have sounded like arrogance, but coming from Reed it was simple fact. Humanity had fought this enemy before and survived. They knew what worked. They knew what failed. They had spent 50 years preparing for this moment. Within 18 hours, the human fleet arrived. 6 massive warships that made Relentless look small by comparison. Each measured over 5 kilometers in length. Each carried enough firepower to level continents. Each was commanded by officers who had studied Scourge tactics obsessively since childhood. Fleet Admiral Cole was older than Reed, her face marked by scars that told stories of close combat and narrow survival. She met with Confederation military leadership in a secure bunker on Confluence Station and immediately took control of the situation with quiet authority. "We have 3 objectives," Cole stated without preamble. "First, evacuate civilian populations from threatened colonies. Second, establish defensive lines that can hold against Scourge. Assault waves. Third, locate and destroy their mobile construction facilities before they can build up overwhelming force." "How long do we have?" Cross asked. 2 weeks at most," Cole replied. "Then they will have sufficient numbers to launch full-scale invasions. We need to hurt them now before they are ready." The galaxy was at war, and for the first time in generations, species that had forgotten what conflict truly meant would learn from those who never had. The defense of Ashara colony became the testing ground for combined human Confederation tactics. The Scourge had chosen their target well. Ashara held 12 million civilians and served as a major trade hub for 3 sectors. Its capture would give the machines a foothold deep in Confederation territory. Fleet Admiral Cole positioned her forces with calculated precision. Human battleships formed the center line, their massive hulls creating a wall of armor and firepower. Confederation vessels deployed on the flanks, their faster ships providing mobility the heavier human craft lacked. It was not the elegant formation Confederation commanders preferred, but Cole had not come for elegance. Captain Reed commanded Relentless as part of the defensive screen. His patrol frigate looked tiny compared to the battleships, but he had a crucial role. Human doctrine emphasized layered defense. Battleships provided main firepower. Frigates handled point defense and intercepted smaller Scourge units. Together, they created overlapping fields of destruction that nothing could pass through intact. "Contacts inbound," the sensor officer reported. "Multiple signatures, estimate 240 units. Admiral Cross, commanding a Confederation battle group from his flagship, felt his stomach tighten. 240. His entire fleet numbered 37 vessels. The numbers were insane. "All ships hold position," Cole's voice came through the command channel, utterly calm. "Wait for optimal firing solutions. Conserve ammunition for sustained engagement." The Scourge fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in a loose swarm formation. Mechanical constructs of various sizes, all angular and brutal in design. No two were exactly alike, each one built from whatever materials the Scourge had consumed. Some showed traces of their origins, hull plates that once belonged to freighters or stations, now repurposed into weapons of war. They accelerated toward Ashara without hesitation, without formation, without tactics beyond simple overwhelming assault. The Confederation vessels shifted nervously. Every instinct trained into their crews screamed to maneuver, to evade, to maintain distance. The human ships did not move. Range closing, Reed reported from Relentless. Entering maximum engagement envelope in 40 seconds. Weapons free on my mark, Cole commanded. All human vessels target pattern Alpha. Confederation ships engage targets of opportunity. The seconds ticked down. The Scourge swarm grew larger on visual displays. Cross gripped his command chair arms. Beside him, his tactical officer whispered calculations about being outnumbered 6-1. Mark, Cole said. The human fleet opened fire. Not the measured, careful shots Confederation doctrine preferred, but a devastating barrage that turned space itself into a killing field. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, missile salvos, and specialized pulse weapons all launched simultaneously. The doctrine was simple: overwhelming firepower applied with absolute prejudice. The Scourge swarm vanished into explosions. Dozens of mechanical constructs simply ceased to exist, torn apart by concentrated fire. More advanced units survived the initial barrage but sustained heavy damage. The machines did not slow. They pushed through the debris of their destroyed fellows without hesitation. Second wave fire, Cole ordered. The human ships maintained steady, rhythmic fire. Recharge, acquire target fire, recharge, acquire target fire. Their weapons cycled with mechanical efficiency. The Confederation vessels joined in, adding their firepower to the defensive screen. Together, they created a wall of destruction. But the Scourge kept coming. Some units reached point defense range. Relentless's automated systems engaged, tracking and destroying incoming threats with computer precision. Small Scourge constructs exploded by the dozens. Larger units took multiple hits before failing. The machines threw themselves forward with no regard for preservation. They are trying to overwhelm our defenses through attrition, Cross realized. They will sacrifice everything to get through. Then we make that sacrifice too expensive, Reed replied, redirecting Relentless's main batteries to support a Confederation cruiser under heavy assault. The battle raged for 6 hours, the Scourge committed. Wave after wave of units. The human Confederation fleet held position and destroyed everything that came within range. Occasionally, a Scourge construct broke through, only to be intercepted by human fighters or destroyed by close-range fire from the battleships. Admiral Cross watched his tactical displays with growing comprehension. The human ships absorbed damage that would have destroyed Confederation vessels. Their armor held under sustained fire. Their redundant systems kept weapons operational even when primary power failed. They were built for exactly this kind of grinding, brutal combat. Final Scourge wave destroyed, the sensor officer reported. Counting wreckage confirmed destruction of all hostile units. The defensive line had held. Ashara was safe. The combined fleet had destroyed over 200 Scourge constructs while losing only 4 Confederation vessels and sustaining moderate damage to several human ships. By conventional calculations, it was a miracle. By human standards, it was acceptable losses. Fleet Admiral Cole immediately began damage assessment and repositioning. There was no celebration, no relief. This was one battle. The Scourge would return with more units, and the defenders needed to be ready. Captain Reed brought Relentless alongside Cross's flagship. The patrol frigate showed burn marks across its hull, and one section of armor had been completely torn away, exposing internal structure. But the ship was still operational, still ready to fight. "Admiral Cross," Reed said through the communications channel, "your fleet fought well. Your crews adapted quickly to coordinated tactics." "We survived because of your ships," Cross replied honestly. Without human firepower, we would have been overrun in the first hour. Without your mobility, we would have been flanked and isolated, Reed countered. This is why we fight together. Our strengths complement each other. The battle had proven a critical point. Confederation ships brought speed and advanced sensors. Human ships brought durability and devastating firepower. Together, they were more capable than either could be alone. The Scourge had expected to face divided species. Instead, they encountered unified resistance. Ambassador Rylan arrived on Confluence Station 3 days after the battle. He had spent the time reviewing casualty reports and tactical analysis. The humans had saved Ashara, but at cost. 4. Confederation vessels destroyed meant over 3,000 lives lost. Families would mourn, worlds would grieve. He found Captain Reed in one of the station's observation lounges, looking out at the stars. The humans seemed tired but not defeated. "The Council wants to thank you formally," Ryland said, "and apologize for our previous dismissals of your warnings." "Apologies mean nothing to the dead," Reed replied quietly. "But they mean something to the living. Help us stop the Scourge before more die. That is thanks enough." 3 months of war changed the galaxy forever. The Scourge launched attacks across a dozen systems. Each time they met combined resistance, the mechanical swarms were destroyed. Each time they adapted, becoming more efficient with their tactics. But humanity had fought this enemy before and knew the key to final victory was not defensive holding actions, but offensive destruction. Fleet Admiral Cole led the strike into deep space. Human intelligence had located the Scourge construction facilities, massive mobile factories that consumed asteroids and debris to build new combat units. Destroy the factories and the Scourge offensive would collapse. Allow them to continue operating, and the machines would eventually overwhelm any defense through sheer production capacity. The strike fleet numbered 32 human warships and 74 Confederation vessels. It was the largest combined military operation in galactic history. Ships from species that had never cooperated before now flew in coordinated formations, united by necessity and guided by human tactical doctrine. Captain Reed commanded the forward element. Relentless led 6 other patrol frigates on a deep reconnaissance sweep. They found the Scourge factories in a dead system, 7 massive constructs orbiting a burned-out star. Each factory was kilometers across, bristling with defensive systems and surrounded by hundreds of smaller Scourge units. "This is it," Reed transmitted back to the main fleet. 7 primary targets, heavy defensive presence. Estimate 400 combat units as immediate response force. "Understood," Cole replied. "Hold position, main fleet arriving in 6 hours." Those 6 hours felt eternal. Reed and his captains watched the Scourge factories work with terrible efficiency. Raw materials went in one end. Completed combat units emerged from the other. The machines built in silence without celebration, without rest, driven by programming that knew only expansion and consumption. The main fleet arrived in battle formation. Human battleships at the center, Confederation vessels creating a defensive envelope. Admiral Cross commanded the right flank. Commanders from 6 other species led their own battle groups. All waited for Cole's order. "All vessels," Cole's voice carried absolute certainty. "Engage at will. Show them what unified resistance means." The battle began with a massive first strike. Over 100 ships opened fire simultaneously, targeting the Scourge factories with everything they had. Specialized pulse weapons, designed by humanity and mass-produced by Confederation industrial worlds, tore through defensive systems. The factories began to break apart, their construction processes disrupted. The Scourge response was immediate and overwhelming. Combat units swarmed from hidden positions. More emerged from the factories even as they died, half-built constructs thrown into battle with whatever weapons had been installed. The machines did not care about readiness or proper completion. They cared only about stopping the attack. The combined fleet met them with coordinated fire. Human ships provided anchor points of heavy resistance. Confederation vessels maneuvered around them, striking at flanks and isolating enemy groups. Fighter craft from both forces hunted smaller scourge units. It was chaos organized by purpose, violence directed by intelligence. Captain Reed found himself in close combat with a scourge-heavy unit. The mechanical construct battered relentless with weapons fire. Hull armor ablated away. Internal bulkheads sealed as sections decompressed. But the ship kept fighting. Crew members sealed in damaged sections continued their duties. Engineers rerouted power through secondary systems. Weapons officers maintained fire even as their stations sparked and flickered. "This is what we built you for," Reed said to his ship, to his crew, to the engineers who designed Relentless to survive the unsurvivable. "Hold together just a little longer." The patrol frigate's main battery charged one final time. Reed waited for the perfect moment, the single instant when the Scourge unit's defenses cycled between regenerations. He fired. The pulse weapon hit the mechanical construct's central processor. The Scourge unit stopped, drifted, and began breaking apart as its internal systems failed. Across the battlefield, similar victories played out. The Scourge fought with their usual relentless determination, but they faced enemies who had learned from previous encounters. The combined fleet knew how to target weak points. They understood Scourge tactics. They refused to be intimidated by superior numbers. The last factory exploded 6 hours into the battle. The remaining Scourge combat units fought on until destroyed. They did not retreat. They did not surrender. They simply fought until nothing remained. When the shooting finally stopped, the fleet floated in a field of debris that had once been the Scourge's primary manufacturing capability. "All ships report status," Cole ordered. The responses came in slowly. 12 vessels destroyed, 28 heavily damaged, but 64 remained operational. Against the Scourge's 400 units and 7 factories, the cost was acceptable. This was not their only manufacturing site, Admiral Cross said during the post-battle briefing. "Intelligence suggests at least 3 more facilities in unexplored regions." "Then we find them and destroy them too," Cole replied simply. "We have proven we can win together. Now we prove we can pursue and finish what we started." The war continued for another year, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Human experience combined with Confederation resources proved unstoppable. Every Scourge facility was located and destroyed. Every combat unit was hunted down and eliminated. The machines that had nearly destroyed humanity 50 years ago were eradicated as a threat to galactic civilization. Ambassador Ryland stood once again in the Confederation Council chamber. But this time, he stood beside Captain Reed, both of them addressing a very different gathering than the one that had dismissed humanity years before. "Humanity has earned not just membership, but our gratitude," Counselor Draven said. The once arrogant official had learned humility through survival. "Without their warnings, their ships, their experience, the Scourge would have consumed us all." "We did not help you for gratitude," Reed replied. "We helped because we knew what the Scourge could do. We had already paid the price of learning that lesson. We were not going to let others suffer the same way." "Nevertheless," Ryland said, "the Confederation owes humanity a debt that cannot be easily repaid." "Then repay it by learning from our example," Reed suggested. "Do not judge species by their elegance or their technology. Judge them by their willingness to protect others. The galaxy almost died because you dismissed us as primitive. Maybe being primitive means we remember that survival requires strength, and strength means nothing if you will not use it to defend those who cannot defend themselves." The Confederation voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership with permanent council seats. Human ships continued to patrol borders alongside Confederation vessels. Human engineers shared their defensive technology. Human tactical doctrine became required study at military academies across the galaxy. Captain Reed eventually returned to commanding Relentless on patrol routes through human space. He preferred the quiet dignity of service to the noise of politics. But he knew that his ship, his crew, and all the humans who had served had changed